face of the past with faith in the future now on BBC Two, Yoko Ono.
Yoko Ono, lifelong artist and musician, 40 years and more now, wife and widow of John Lennon, you were once described as the most famous unknown artist in the world. Everyone knows who she is, but nobody knows what she does. How would you describe what you do?
Well, I just do whatever I can do. I'm a human being like you, and I just try to do what I can do.
But when you do something that you want to put in a gallery, to put on show, you want people to look at, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to amuse us, to surprise us?
I'm just trying to communicate and stimulate and inspire and give some good, strong energy to people and wake them up sometimes, and it's just a form of communication. But I must say that sometimes I was not able to do shows in galleries, and I used any situation.
You've made films. You're what I
Yes.
suppose we would call a conceptual artist. You've recorded close on a dozen rock albums. Is there a common core to the whole of this, or is it all different?
They're all part of me. It's like breathing in and out, you know. And sometimes you do it in a different way, in a different, using a different medium, that's all.
Which is your most natural medium? Do you prefer to be thought of as an artist or a musician?
Well, I mean, I don't think of myself as an artist or musician or anything. It's just, if anything, I would like to think of myself as an artist with a capital A, meaning all-encompassing. And in that sense, I can use anything. I feel more comfortable writing, making music and doing artworks, the usual kind of old-fashioned kind of way that, old-fashioned is not the word, is it? I think
Familiar.
Familiar for me, way of doing it. And it's just when I'm inspired to do something, it comes, you see, as a visual experience or a tactile experience or auditorial experience. And so I just know what I have to do with it.
There are different worlds, as it were, that you work in, because the music world is a very popular world of pop and rock, and the art can be thought of, or was once thought of, as avant-garde.
Well, I don't say that. I mean, when I was making music in the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, I was doing avant-garde music, you know. So it's not necessarily that music world is a pop world.
And you studied with an avant-garde musician, John Cage.
Well, no, I didn't study with avant-garde musicians. I was friends with them. And before that, I studied, at school, I studied classical composition, things like that.
When did you first learn music? Did you study it as a child?
Yes. When I was very, very young, and my father, who gave up being a pianist, he was a very good one actually, and got good reviews and all that as well, but then his father wanted him to become a banker, just like his father. And that was in his will or something, I don't know. So he gave up being a musician, and so he had always wanted his firstborn, whether girl or boy, to be a pianist. And so when I first met my father, which was a very strange situation, I was born in Tokyo, And then when I was about exactly 2.5 years old, I went to San Francisco to meet my father, who was then in San Francisco. And the first thing he did was to check my hands, you know. So, well, let's see, this has to be very long, and, you know, this part has to be very long to reach the octave or whatever. And I think at that point, my hands just shrunk like this, you know. Because I don't know what it is, but I had a kind of rebellious spirit in me from the beginning. And so whatever they wanted me to be, I kind of avoided, I think.
When you first made films, I'll come back to your childhood, when you first made films and art objects, they were thought, some of them, to be shocking. The film you made in Britain with 365 bare bottoms on it. Nowadays they seem less astonishing. Is it you that's changed, or the way we see things, the way the world's changed?
Well, it's not so shocking anymore, I suppose. I was into creating things to expand the horizon of what you can do in art or what you can do in music. That was kind of how I felt. I was feeling very rebellious, I suppose, and that's what I did. And I felt satisfied in doing that. But, and it's no surprise, I suppose, but it wasn't taken too well at the time.
But by expanding the horizon, you were part of a group of people that were saying the ordinary can be art. Art isn't special. Art and life have no barrier between them. Is that right?
Well, that's one way of putting it, yes.
How would you put it?
I would say that we were exploring ways of communicating that was not thought of before, so previously. Because if we're going to just repeat ourselves, we might as well not do anything. So we wanted to create, I think, well, I would speak for myself too, but I wanted to create a new language. Yes?
And what form did that take?
Oh, in many forms. I mean, in films, art, music, poetry, and performance art. They call it performance art now, but it kind of events that I did. You know. And it was very exciting because I knew that I was going into a kind of area that that was not explored before.
In the current show that's on at Oxford at the moment and is touring, there's a dark piece called Vertical Memory,
Yes.
in which there are these
Have you seen that?
yeah.
Oh, thank you.
And but they have different captions, and one of these pieces, one of the captions describes a scene you've already mentioned, when you see your father for the first time at the age of 2.5, and you see him
Kissing
looking
my
at
mother.
you, kissing your mother. Did you
I'm
resent
just
that?
looking both of them like this. Yes, I remember that. No, I didn't resent. I thought it's just, you know, everything was all mysterious when you're very young. Everything's just mysterious, and you're just looking, you know. And yes, so picking the threads there about my father, and I think I became a lousy pianist because my father wanted me to be a pianist so much. But I was trained to have perfect pitch and to know how to compose songs and things like that from then on, early age, because he felt that that was part of understanding how to play piano. And so that was exciting. I was much more interested in composing, rather than performing in terms of playing piano.
You've told us that your father became a banker rather than a pianist. Tell me about your mother.
My mother and my father, they came from very different backgrounds, in a sense. They were both kind of from well-to-do family, but my father's family was very westernized. And my grandfather studied, well, went to graduated university in America. In those days, that's a long time ago, turn of the century. And all my father's...
Which was very unusual for a Japanese to do.
Very unusual at that point. A few of them did it. And my father's first brother, the oldest brother, went to Moscow to study, Moscow University. And the second brother went to Sorbonne. I mean, it was like, really like that, very, very westernized. And my grandmother used to make crack jokes in English kind of thing, you know, so they were like that. And my mother's side was extremely Japanese, extremely classical Japanese household, family. And she studied, I think, about 7, I won't count it, but 7 or 8 Japanese instruments.
Musical instruments?
Yes, musical instruments. And she was very good at them. And also, she's the one who taught me a lot about the classical Japanese ways. And so it was like 2 cultures crashing there, you know. It was very interesting.
And they were very wealthy? The house had lots of servants?
Yes. Well, that's the side, I don't know. I wouldn't say, okay. So let's say that I come from a privileged background. And I used to be very embarrassed about that because, you know, most people don't like that, I don't think. And I mean, even now, you know, it's easier, it's nicer to say, my father was a truck driver and I did this single-handedly and I'm successful, whatever, you know. And in my case, I think that the fact that my environment was like that just makes it, if I do describe it to some extent about that, most people will say, oh, then why didn't you make something out of yourself? I mean, that was so easy, wasn't it? You know, it's that kind of background.
You were in Tokyo for part of the war and the great bombing raids on Tokyo. Do you have memories of the bombs? Or were you taken out of the city before the big raids started?
Well, I was in Tokyo for a while. Well, we were in Tokyo. And it was very scary because we had to go into the bunker down, on the underground bunker, whenever there's, the planes are coming or something and there's siren going on and all that. And at night you had to keep all the windows black out, you know, putting all these dark black curtains. And all that. It was really frightening. And then at one point my mother decided that she should send the children to Nagano, which was a kind of a safer district.
Right, out of Tokyo. Were you aware of the atomic bomb being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Yes, yes.
How were you aware of that?
Well, I've heard about it. You know, I was in the mountains, so to speak, in a farmhouse and all that. It was just totally different from Tokyo, you see. But anyway, and then one of the farmers kind of came to us for afternoon tea or something. Said, "Did you know what happened?" etc., etc. But it was sort of like a distant thing at that point. Oh, really? Kind of, you know, you can't really fathom it. And then, pretty soon, the war was over, and the emperor on the radio sort of announced that the war is over, and we all cried. I just remember that.
Did you have a happy childhood, would you say?
Well, an interesting childhood.
You came to America and you went to college here. Did you fit in college, Sarah Lawrence?
Well, again, it was very interesting. And I think Sarah Lawrence's experience was very different from the kind of experience that you might assume that I would have had because being an Oriental woman and Oriental girl, whatever. But it was a very kind of sophisticated, politically correct atmosphere. So everybody was very kind, and it was fine, you know.
But you were a rebel?
I was a bit, yes. For instance, what I used to do was, well, now, I mean, now everybody's doing that, it's so fun. But I used to have just one earring and go to the dining room or something. And my classmates will say, you know, and then they're just looking because they don't want to say anything because they know that I'm outrageous and they don't want to, don't want me to say, well, I did it on purpose or something. So just looking. Now I would have one earring, and sometimes I used to have shoes with my toes sticking out, you know, because it was funny. Like a regular shoe, but just a toe sticking out. There's a hole here. And everybody's just looking at it. You know, on that level, maybe.
You dropped out of Sarah Lawrence, in a way, and came to live in a loft in the lower west side of New York. How did you get started as a performance artist? How did you get going?
Well, to make a long story short, I eloped with, then we got married, but I mean, my first husband, Toshi Janai, who's a composer, who was in Juilliard School of Music. And and then I realized that there's so many friends of ours who would like to perform their works as composers, works in some concert hall. But at the time there was only Carnegie Hall, Town Hall, and Carnegie Recital Hall. And if you're a composer, I mean, if you're a performer, and if you want to play Stravinsky or something, that's a very good performer, then you get a chance of playing in Carnegie Hall. If you're a composer, hardly likely. Composers, you had to be very famous to finally get to playing these halls. So my friends were all kind of avant-garde, and so we didn't have a chance to express ourselves in that sense. So I thought, well, what if I get a loft? Well, I didn't even know the name loft, so I was thinking in terms of just a space, you know. And what if I get a space and we all do our thing there? And then somebody told me, well, if you're thinking of that, why don't you think about a loft? I said, what is a loft? I mean, in those days, loft was not known. And this guy was explaining that, he was an artist, and he was explaining a couple of artists are now starting to go downtown and make a studio out of lofts, which is actually a storage room, the original storage rooms. But they're big enough and they're cheap, you know. So, and if you are interested, I would take you down there this Sunday or something like that. So I went down, and he was saying, oh, that's taken already. And this, well, we know this one here, I'd like to show you. And it was like 5 floors that you have to walk up. And it's a cold water flat, no electricity, nothing. And it's just a real dump, you know. But I was very excited. And I got that, and I wanted to make that into a kind of concert hall series kind of thing. And all my friends who kind of Juilliard School of Music types, you know, they were totally horrified. They said, what are you doing? I mean, nobody's going to go downtown to listen to music. They're all going to expect to go to maybe, you know, if there's a new concert hall, it has to be around Carnegie Hall, Town Hall, that area. And I took a chance.
And it worked.
It worked.
Was it particularly difficult being a woman artist in those days?
Yes. At the time when I got the place, and I was very excited, and you know, I was going to do something about it. And then one of my friend composer called me and said, Lamont Young is interested in doing something like that, and he likes your place very much, meaning a loft, and could he join and do it with you? So I said, sure, it's fine. And because all my friends came to see the place, and so Lamont Young liked it. So Lamont and I started a series, and started to do all these concerts. And I was considered the owner of the loft, and who had a Chinese patron called Young. Well, he was not Chinese, and he was not my patron. You know, this is that whole idea about if it's a woman, you know.
Right.
And it was considered Lamont Young's series, and I was just the owner of the loft or something like
I
that.
see. But it was really you.
Well, I thought of doing it, and maybe Lamont had the idea of doing it too, but I don't know. I just got this call, and they said that Lamont was interested in joining. That's how it started.
You began to give shows and you began to be reviewed, and in the 60s you came to London, so-called swinging London. Why did you come to London?
That's another thing. It's so funny because I was doing very well in New York and doing a series of concerts of other people in this loft, but then aside of that I was doing my own concerts as well, and group concerts, etc., and one woman show, etc. And I was just very excited with all the ideas that I had and everything. And then I went back to Japan to do a concert, all that. And then I got together with my second husband, Tony Cox. And I had a baby, Kyoko. That was...
Who's since had a baby, so that you are now a grandmother.
I know. But, and suddenly the world changed. You know, up to then I was free and I was doing this, doing that, you know. And then when you have a baby, and when, you know, it's a kind of a family situation. And then I went back to New York and did all these concerts again. But
Were you disapproved of in Japan?
Well, that's another story. I was totally accepted. There was some incredible excitement, and totally rejected, if you know what I mean.
Right.
You know, the people who loved it and got excited, and people who hated it,
Right.
you know. So I don't want to go into that, but I mean, it was a storm. Let's put it that way. I created a storm, you know. And then I came back to New York, and now it was a different scene. In the late 50s and early 60s, when I was doing things, I was doing it. And now, when I came back, I saw that all the other people are starting to do, and the loft scene was getting to be like a normal scene. There were many loft concerts and things like that.
Time to move on.
Move on, yes. And then, of course, I didn't get along. Well, didn't get along isn't the word, but, well, my partnership with Tony was a little bit kind of roller coaster. So I thought, well, you know, I have to move on. This partnership is over.
So you came to London, you had shows in London, you made a film in London, you met John Lennon in London.
I know. You see, it's a very strange thing, because I got an invitation from Distraction and Art Symposium. And they said, would you know, please come and perform your stuff or whatever. And at the time I thought, I'm not going to go to London. I'm at the Mecca of art.
In New York.
The center, you know, of art in New York. And it made me feel like I'm going to go to some kind of strange province, you know, to do something. And they were saying, no, but London is swinging London. It's very exciting now. I said, oh, yeah, of course. You know, like I wasn't believing it. And once I went to London, I was totally surprised. Things were happening, and people were very sensitive, beautiful people. I mean, I just got so excited. And I started doing things. It was very easy for me to do things, and I was getting more and more inspired. Oh, it was great. It was great.
Tell us how you met John Lennon.
Do you want to know that story again?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So I, after Distraction, well, not after, during the Distraction and Art Symposium, I was given many chances to do different shows. and which I've done. And then there was a Indica Gallery, and they said they were doing a show. John Dunbar was the one who was doing this very avant-garde gallery, and he was organizing it. He was one of those kind of English intellectual, very nice guy. But anyway, so I did a show in Indica Gallery, and the night of the opening, I wasn't ready, which was November 8th. And so we kept saying, no, tomorrow, tomorrow. And then November 9th, we finally got ready, everything was ready, and it was about an hour before the opening. It was a kind of exciting moment, and everything was just ready. And John Dunbar brought in John Lennon. And I was a bit upset, because John Dunbar was one of those people who was very sensitive, caring about artists' feeling and everything. And I did tell John that I didn't want anybody in there before the opening. And here's this guy comes in, he's bringing this guy in. And I thought, well, maybe he's a good friend or something. I have to be, nice or something about it and not scream or anything. And I'm just watching. And, that's how we met.
And he was on your wavelength, because he offered to hammer in an imaginary nail. Did your closeness with him and togetherness with him provoked a lot of hostility?
I know, yes, it did. And it was very strange, because up to then, I felt that the English people understood my work. There was an incredible rapport between the audience and me, and even the critics, even the regular reporters, journalists, they were all very kind. It went very well. And suddenly, they turned on me.
Yeah. Do you think you broke up the Beatles, or do you think that would have ended anyway, that artistic partnership?
Of course I didn't break up the Beatles. I mean, if I had, then I'm a very strong woman. You can't have 4 very strong men, just listen to me and break up or something like that. It didn't, it wasn't like that at all. I think the fact that, I think the historians probably would see it, observe it one day, that the fact that their concert tours were over, and already they were feeling, well, what next then? But, well, we shall continue just recording, that kind of feeling. So for them, I think it was a very unsettling time as well. And then Brian died, that kind of thing.
You talk about them as very strong men, but there was a famous photograph of you and John in Rolling Stone, which showed him in a sort of fetal position, naked, sort of draping himself around you and beneath you, which sort of suggested that you were mothering him, that you were the stronger figure of the two.
Well, that's your interpretation. You know what that was? John was a very strong and also vulnerable man. But you see, he was strong enough to allow his vulnerability to be shown. And because we went to this primal scream thing, and so we had this feeling that, yes, it's much better that we let it all down and show yourself, and it's healthier to do that. So John was just trying to teach people. Right. This is what I don't mind doing. This is what I would do to a woman, that I don't treat women badly. In fact, I respect them. I love them, I think that was very courageous of him, because especially he's coming from a very macho background. And in a macho background where you're supposed to do this and maybe kick the woman or something like that. And instead, just showing that. And knowing that a lot of guys will say, oh, what a wimp, or something like that. And it's the future. It's the future that if guys can do that, and then women will start to melt too, we have to get together instead of being in a combative mood.
So he suggested that pose to the photographer, Annie Leibovitz, rather than she suggesting it to you two? Can you remember?
Well, let's say that we accepted, we agreed to do it. You know, in no disrespect to the photographer, you know.
What's a typical day in your life at the moment?
All right. I get up early, pretty early, around 7. By 8, I start the day. Sometimes I like to make appointments with lawyers around that time because it's easier to get on with things, and afterwards I have all the time in the world to do other things. And then from 9 to 5, more or less, I either go into my office or be in my study and take care of business, etc. But for lunch, I go out. I take a walk, which is very important for me. I take a walk and go to lunch. And and then, you know, I said 9 to 5, but sometimes the morning is the most intensive time that I work, and business-wise.
What is the business? Is it record rights, property, the farms?
Well,
what is it?
mostly to do with the estate.
Right.
And then after that, and there are many kind of letters that come to me that I have to kind of asking for this or that, and I have to decide what to do with them. And in the afternoon, instead of going back to the office, I would go to the studio to do my music, or sometimes just do my drawings or something like that. And then in the evening, I like to relax.
How do you do that?
Well, all right, reading, playing chess, and of course I don't miss the news, TV news.
Is New York home?
It is my home. It's a very strange, maybe it's to do with my childhood, where I was always moving around with my parents. So I feel that New York is definitely my home. But whenever I go to places that I like, I always feel like, oh, I have to get an apartment here, or I love it here, you know. And then there are many cities that I love. I like San Francisco, I like LA too, I like London, I like Paris, I like Geneva. Well, I can't count them all, but there are many cities that I love.
Is the Dakota home?
Yes, it is.
Will it always be?
Well, for Sean, he has never seen me otherwise. I was always there. But I had a whole different life before that. So I felt that when I came to Dakota, I felt it was a kind of, I never thought that it was going to be that permanent. I thought this is another stop, you know, in my life. And then after what happened, I felt that for Sean's sake, I should keep a very permanent kind of situation for him as much as I can.
Does he live there with you?
Not now. He's a he's a grown boy now.
In the show at Oxford, there's a piece which consists of 2 piles of stones, and you tell us that we should put a stone on the pile each time in one pile, each time there's sadness, and another stone on the other pile each time there's happiness. Which pile is larger in your life, the pile of sadness or the pile of happiness?
Well, I don't know. I never counted. But also, I think that when I look back, the feeling I have about everything is that there's nothing I can change. And I would not, this me now, would not exist without all the things that happened to me. So I'm very thankful, and thankful of what I have now. I think that not just my life, but life is a blessing, depending on how you deal with it. Life is what you make of it, and anything else that comes to you without your planning, you have to think of it as a teaching or blessing. That's how I feel. And that's not religious, that's just being logical.
There's another caption in the Oxford show in which your mother seems to be saying to you, "You still don't know how scary the world is, Yoko."
know.
Do you feel that? Would you say that to your granddaughter? You still don't know how scary...
I don't know if I would say that, no. Since I think that life is what you make of it in a way, as much as you could, actually, so that I would like not to give her a kind of a negative feeling about it. But I think, yes, that, life can be very scary.
Again in Oxford, there's a caption that represents a percentage of your life that where you took it lying down. What did you take lying down?
I think, I'm a passive-aggressive. That's how I survived, probably. And that's my view, that I felt like I was taking life lying down. And I think a lot of women feel that way.
And they shouldn't.
Well, in terms of survival, I think that many times we probably had to.
Are the hard times over?
Not really. That's just a prayer.
What do you still hope to achieve?
I like to learn to have fun, and also learn to give people fun with my work, and maybe with my life, I don't know. I think that there's a point where I was interested in the true aspect of life, pursuing the true aspect of life, and somehow presenting it. But now I think, why not? Why can't we just give fun to each other? Now, I haven't started that yet, or maybe I have unwittingly, but I think that's a very good thing to do.
How would you like us to think of you? How would you like us to remember you?
Somebody who loved fully.
And next week, one of America's greatest living writers, author of Glengarry Glen Ross, David Mamet, is face to face at 11:15.